Hello, friends. Good morning. It's great to see you all again today. And we're going to jump into a lecture today a little bit on how methods actually work as part of our writing. What do I mean by that? Why exactly do we need methods, right? We all had to write argument papers in high school. We all had to sit down and write out our thoughts before. What is the point of having actual rhetorical criticism methods? What exactly do I need to use those for? And we're going to dive into that a little bit today. To give you a sense, you're reading individual methods, right? One little box, each little box is a method. What I'm talking about here is the shelf that all of those boxes go on. We use different methods, little boxes, from our shelf as a means of connecting with our audience and our readers. So let's jump into that a little bit today. So let's begin with a review of the Toulmin model of argument. Like many things in rhetoric, the Toulmin model is a way of a sort of sharing a vocabulary, if you will, on how things are used. So before we go any further into today's lecture, I want you to watch the lecture that I have included here. It is linked on D2L, and you can also find it, to do a generic thing here, down in the description of this video on YouTube. So please do go ahead and watch my explanation of the Toulmin model, because we'll be discussing how methods specifically function as part of the Toulmin model. So we get a little further into today's lecture. Focus on understanding, as you watch this, specifically the vital role that warranting assumptions play in making good arguments. Really focus on warranting assumptions. Now, I have chosen to go and put this in another video because some of you have already taken this class with me. This is the same lecture that I give in our public speaking classes. It's the same lecture that I have given in some of the other classes that many of you have taken with me. So if you need to go and put that on a faster speed, or you're really confident with it and just want to zip through really quickly, you can absolutely do that. So please pause this video and go take a look at the included lecture on the Toulmin model of argument. So now that you are back, I'm going to assume that you've taken a look at the Toulmin model of argument, and all of these things in their basic description are fairly familiar. So every argument has some sort of a claim, Dr. Styer, the very best, blah, 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 blah. Offers some kind of data, brightly colored hair, argumentation, critical thinking, whatever. And then you have to understand the warranting assumptions. And warranting assumption is where our methods truly come into their own, because methods help us identify and construct warranting assumptions that can be easily backed and shared by our audiences. They also tell us what kind of claims might need to be qualified in what way, what kind of rebuttals might be offered, and how we can use data and backing to forestall those. So let's dive a little bit into how those warranting assumptions function today. When we are talking about methods as part of your argument, the first thing that methods do is they provide warranting assumptions for those rhetorical arguments that we make. So for instance, metaphoric criticism warrants the idea that metaphors are meaningful to our lives. They're not just linguistic flourishes. There's all kinds of methodological research that can tell your reader that metaphors are really meaningful. That's the same with narrative criticism. When you look at narrative criticism, there's all this research work that gives you a warranting assumption that focusing on stories is a meaningful thing. That warranting assumption is built right into the method that you use. If we're talking about feminist, or as I prefer to call it, gender criticism, you're looking at gender as an important shaping force in our lives, and the method warrants all of those assumptions, right? You don't have to go and prove that gender is important. The method, and people reading who understand that method, will be there already built for you. You don't have to build your warranting bridge. it already exists. If we're talking about cluster criticism, the warranting assumption is that terms that cluster together reveal something about their rhetoric. That's an important warranting assumption. There is good reason to study clusters of terms, and your method provides that for you. In the same way, identifying the act, agent, scene, purpose, and agency, or pentatic criticism of an artifact can help us see the motives for a rhetorical act. So you don't need to go out and prove motivations in some big, deep literature review. Your method does that work for you. And that's one of the really important things that picking a method can do for us as we write rhetorical arguments. The second really important thing that methods can do for us when we're writing rhetorical arguments is methods help us choose data. Now, if you think about data, you will quickly begin to realize that data can be boundless. You can begin to look at every possible iteration of rhetoric and never find the edge where your criticism can stop and actually do more than just describe. You would find yourself just describing the entire world forever if you didn't have edges for what data you needed. And methods help provide those specific edges for your data. So when we study and describe metaphors in metaphor criticism, you have good reason to just describe the metaphors of your particular rhetorical act. If you're using narrative criticism, it tells you how to define the stories and the arch of the narrative in a way that's meaningful. If you're using gender criticism, you study and describe how gender is defined, manifested, and/or controlled in a particular artifact or text. Those are the edges of what you have to describe for your criticism. And the same thing with clusters of terms. The metaphor or the criticism tells you what you really need to describe are the clusters and what those clusters are. If you're studying act, agent, scene, purpose, and agency in an artifact, pentatic criticism tells you where the edges of your definition are. And so that's one of the second really important things that our methods do for us. First, they provide meaningful warranting assumptions for what we're going to describe, and then they tell us what description needs to be included as data in our arguments. So those are two really important ways that methods function. Remember, this applies to all rhetorical criticism methods. All of these methods provide those two things for us: warranting assumptions and boundaries for our data. Finally, methods help us join conversations. And this is beyond just the Toulmin model of argument, but it's something that's going to come up again and again, and I'm going to remind you again and again as you do rhetorical criticism. You are never a single person speaking out alone on a hillside. You're always part of a conversation between other rhetors, other rhetorical critics, and your audience. So methods help us do a few important things. Do not ever send me a paper where you only cite Sonia Foss's book. Is this a great resource? Yes, but it is at best a third string resource. It is a textbook of other people's research. It is a best textbook. It is absolutely phenomenal. You absolutely need it. However, it should never be your primary source on a method. Instead, the methods actually tell you who you need to cite. Foss has helpfully included this at the end of each of her chapters, right? So if I go to chapter 6 and we're talking about gender criticism, I have this whole beautiful thing of notes. Look at all those theorists I can cite who helped develop my method. Look at all the people I can cite in the textbook from the sample essays who've also used my method. I can be in conversation with them. And I can cite work that informs my perspective. If I'm talking about a narrative method of criticism, I can cite other scholars who have shaped our perspective on narrative. If I'm citing gender criticism, I can cite other scholars who have shaped our perspective on gender. So methods also help you join a conversation. Please keep these things in mind. Make sure you have that Toulmin model of argument vocabulary down. I want to make sure that every single one of you, when I say, what's your warranting assumption? Boom. You should be able to instantly tell me and instantly understand. So absolutely at this level, you really need to make sure you know and understand that. This is me looking over my glasses at you. Know and understand the Toulmin model of argument vocabulary. And make sure you're using methods to help you join conversations. I can't wait to discuss these things in class with you all. There is no lecture checkup or reading note checkup for today, but do come prepared to know that vocabulary and be able to use it in class. Have a lovely day, everybody. Bye-bye.